Hey guys, welcome back to Choices Not Chances, and I got another banger for you tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about combat, but we're also going to talk a little bit about transition and about self-help and, maybe what that looks like for people who haven't been there and seen that. It's going to come off the heels of An Otherwise Healthy Person, written by Ron Jansen, who we have the pleasure of having join us tonight. We're going to talk about his book. We're going to talk about his life, a different path, being that he was a reservist, to finding his way to combat as a squad leader in Fallujah. And he operated under a recent guest, General Nicholson, who we had on 2 episodes ago and had nothing but great things to say about him, including writing the foreword for his book. And so without further ado, Ron Jansen, thanks for coming on tonight, man.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, man, I know we've been kind of talking about it and planning it. I wanted to get through the book so I understood where to go with it. And man, great book, great writing, and great accounts. I couldn't be happier with it. It was a fun read for me because of the combat side, and then it was a real read because of some of the personal side and what goes on and what war does to marriage and what war does to us on the insides. In the preceding years after. So. Or in the years following. So I appreciate you coming on. I wish that we could have made it a little bit sooner. We had some things go on here. My wife had a surgery, so we had to get that stuff behind us, but now we're here. So the same as any other episode, if you've seen my shows, I'm going to ask where you come from, who you come from, where you come from, and we'll just kind of take it from there and kind of garage chat it up here.
Sure. So, starting out with me, I live in Byron Center, Michigan, which is West Michigan, just south of Grand Rapids. I've been essentially in this area my entire life. I grew up in the small town of Dorr, which is just a little ways away from here. So I grew up out in the country. We had 5 acres and lived across the street from a pretty big dairy farm and just out in the cornfields and everything. So that was the location. I would say the culture I grew up in a Christian home. I went to a small Christian school, kindergarten through 8th grade, preschool through 8th grade. And then I went to a larger Christian high school after that. It was actually a great experience for me moving from 8th grade, an 8th grade class of 15 kids, to a regular style or a size high school with 150 or 200 kids per grade. It just really expanded my horizons and gave me some hope that maybe the small town I was in, there was something outside of that. And then I graduated high school, did 2 years in community college where I played football. I was trying to extend my career a little bit longer. And then my second year of community college, that was the September 11, 2001. And shortly after that, I enlisted probably within 30 days. And then it was funny, actually, a guy, I've never ran into him again. Another guy from my football team enlisted in the Marine Corps too to become a machine gunner. So I don't know where he's at. I hope he's doing well.
Now, shout out. Let's go back a little bit. Siblings, you said?
Oh, yes. Yep. So I have an older sister who's about a year and a half or 2 years older than me. And then 2 younger brothers who are I think my younger brother is 18 months behind me, and my youngest brother is 18 months behind him or so. So we're all relatively close together.
Check. So 1 of 4, second in the birth order.
Yep.
Me too. I mean, nice. more children came later out of my dad, but in the first litter, that was the same. I find that interesting, and we can talk offline about why I've been doing some research on different things, but I think possible that birth order has something to do with a lot of things. So,
sure.
Yeah. So moving forward from that, you said second year junior college when 9/11 takes place, or
yes,
community college.
So we call it our senior year in junior college. So.
Senior year, yeah, that's right. Now, what were you studying?
At the time, I was studying criminal justice. It was basically general education classes because I was planning on doing a 4-year. Okay. My hope was that I would do 2 years of football and community college and then receive a great offer, but I was an undersized offensive lineman, so I wasn't putting on the weight I needed to. So I had a lot of fun, but I kind of knew by then my playing career was basically capped.
Check.
And then it was kind of the next thing to join the Marines after that.
Okay, and to go back one more time, so if you played football in college, I would assume you always played football growing up, like Pop Warner on through school, or just up in school?
I started, my first year was 8th grade, so I was a little bit behind.
Okay.
But I feel like I caught on quickly. I'd played baseball, basketball, pretty much any sport I could up to that point. And I think my parents didn't want me to start football too early because there was extra cost with the pads and stuff like that. But
Sure.
But I do know once I started playing it, it was like little else mattered when it came to sports. I mean, I still play baseball through high school, but football was definitely the number one for me.
That's where you were at. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you think that team sports in your adolescence is important to the character that you build for being a leader in your adult life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just the way you have to manage the ups and downs and understand like the team dynamics of it. I was just telling somebody recently, even so, my senior year, we lost a rivalry game against a team that we had no business losing to. We beat them 19 years in a row.
Oh wow!
And that you just regret or you just dread what happens that next Monday coming into practice. Like coach is going to run us, for 3.5 hours until somebody drops dead.
Yeah.
And I just remember the coach that next Monday. It was towards the end of the season. It was our second loss. So we were doing pretty well, but we lost to this atrocious team. And he just said, "Hey, suit up, helmets on. We're going to play juniors against seniors. We're just going to scrimmage." Like we just had it. It was just
broke it into something fun.
Playing a game. Yeah, exactly. Where he could have, he gauged that, rather than just yelling at us and telling us how terrible we played, we just needed to get out there and remember why we were playing because we loved playing football. And that sort of lesson stuck with me because I looking back on it, that coach had a really good understanding of where we were at that time, and I think that stuck with me. Not only when I was, not a leader or in a leadership position, but then moved into a leadership position of just understanding you really have to understand where your team is at and or squad or whatever the size is, and know, maybe go outside the bounds of what you would normally think you should do just to make sure you have to guide them in the right way for what they need at that exact moment.
Yeah, it's not always one size fits all, too, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Some guy might need yelled at, and the other guy might need coddled.
Right. Yeah, and we got yelled at plenty of times that year too. I mean, it was
dime a dozen, baby.
I think at that point, he just had to remind us, "Hey, let's go out there and have some fun." And we ended up. A side note to that, we ended up going to the state finals that year. Where
wow!
And we lost the final game, but we made a run through the playoffs, and just it was from that point, it was kind of a turning point in our season. We're like, "Hey, let's just go out there and have fun, play hard, and win."
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. And then again, from before, I would assume that if you went to a Christian school, you had belief and faith inside the house as well?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, definitely. I would say my parents always kind of set a strong example when it came to their faith, and we attended church. So we were the type that attended church twice every Sunday, once in the morning, once every evening, which I had some qualms with when I was a kid, of course, but yeah, I would say more, I really respect the fact that my parents at the time and continue to live out their faith. There's like there's Sunday morning faith, which it's easy to kind of put on a show to say, "Hey, we're here. We showed up. We
casual Christian."
Yeah, exactly. But I've also, throughout my parents' lives or my life, as I see my parents, I've seen them kind of live into what they believe as well, which I think is far more important than kind of the image we project out there of where we're at in our lives, in whatever it is, whether it's faith or work or other things.
Sure, right on. Okay, so you're in your second year at community college, and that's in 2001 September. 11th attacks take place. Tell me, you said that it was pretty short order after that you ended up, signing up and leaving. Tell me the emotions that you had when you seen the attack through the enlistment.
Yeah, that's good. So I was working at that point. I had arranged my schedule, so I was working, I think, 2 days a week and had school 3 days a week. So I think, if I remember right, September 11th was a Tuesday, and so I was working at a local construction site at a shopping mall, installing a security system there. So it was kind of this surreal time when the first tower was hit and you heard a little bit about it, but we were still like, okay, well, we got work to do. I don't know what's going on.
Sure.
And then by the time the second one happened, like everybody didn't quite know what's going on. Now it became clear, oh, this is an attack, or this is something greater. And so, we're all huddled. I think there was one TV on site that somebody had rigged up with a coat hanger for an antenna, and we were all just watching it. But I remember, I considered joining the military before that, and the Marines in particular. But at that moment, I just kind of thought, boy, if I'm going to do this, now's the time. And it wasn't clear, at that point, I don't think they had all planes accounted for. They, you heard the Pentagon got hit, and the other plane that went down, and there would, nobody knew if there was 20 more planes or 50 more planes or whatever. So it was, but that was kind of my initial reaction, just kind of the shock and understanding, okay, we're under attack. And then I think it wasn't too far after that where I thought, somebody's got to fight, and I don't know why it wouldn't be me.
Where does that come from?
I don't know. That's a good question. I wouldn't say so. My dad, he had health issues early on. He was in a really bad accident when he was younger, so he never served in the military or wasn't drafted into Vietnam, which was kind of his era. I had one grandfather who served at the end of World War II, but never was in combat. He ended up, I think he was part of the force that went and occupied Japan after the atomic bombs were dropped. But I definitely didn't grow up in a military part of the country, or a really strong military family. But for as long as I remember, like, that is the type of thing I gravitated towards. I'm not sure why, but it was just something. It was on my mind a lot.
The reason I ask is because I had that same thing. I'm in high school, but I had the same thing, like a yearning or a calling, like it grabbed my soul and said, this is what you're supposed to do, something that. And of course you felt something like that, and a bunch of people from our generation of warfighters felt that on that day because of that. And what I try to figure out is, like, out of all the 17 to 22-year-old men in America at the time, why did such a small percentage feel that way and have that emotion and act on that emotion? Is it a venture? Is it a yearning to get away and experience the world? Or is it something that's archetypical inside of us that says that's what you do when the emergence of war happens? And so that's what I play around with in my head of, where does it come from? Why did I feel that way? Why did thousands of us feel that way?
Right.
And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just try to figure out where it comes from.
And it's interesting when you say that, because I think, you once you're in the Marines, you're around a bunch of other people who think exactly the way you do. So it's like, it's natural that you would feel that way or think that way.
Yeah.
But if you put it in perspective of everyone, most of the people that I grew up with were in college campuses, or they were back home, working a job or whatever, and gave no thought, as far as I know, to joining, and nor did I try to convince them to.
Sure.
Like, that was my decision. But I'm not sure exactly why. For whatever reason, for me, that was the tipping point. And that's what I knew I wanted to do.
Hell yeah. All right, well, let's move on. So anything notable from boot camp? Anything shocking? Anything mesmerizing or crazy even?
Not really. It kind of felt like you had to check the box to get past that. That's what it felt. I mean, it was. I don't want to minimize it. It's definitely a formative experience because it gives you the building blocks for the rest of your time in the Marines. But I don't know. I think for the most part, I was able to see past it and see it was kind of like
got to do this to get to that.
Right.
Yep,
And this isn't the real Marine Corps. This is the starting point. It's the jumping off point, but I'm trying to think. I was just thankful that I made it through in the 90 days or whatever it was. That was my main goal. I didn't want to, have an injury.
Don't stay on the island longer than you have to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting because no shade being thrown at all, but when I talk to guys who did not see significant combat, they always have a wild boot camp story or a wild SOI story, and that's great. I love hearing them. They're generally pretty fucking hilarious.
Right, yeah.
But generally, when I talk to guys that went down range and did, some real work, it's like before that in their career, nothing meant anything. Not that it didn't mean, like, of course you're proud, of course you're honored, of course you had great times, you had great friends, but it's like all of that was just the workup to do something here. And so everything before that paled in comparison to me once I got home. And so I'm not saying everybody feels that way. I'm just saying it's interesting to me that those characters that I have on the show are the ones that I'm like, it was just, it's a means to an end so I get over here. The fleet was where I really had story. That's usually what I hear.
Right.
Interesting.
And that's interesting because I don't know if I would have thought of it the way I just described it. When I first got out, I'm certain when I came out of boot camp, I had all sorts of stories of crazy stuff where, it's almost like those have been superseded by other stuff that came after. And now I'm like, it was
it's
fun.
Weird, right? You don't even think about these things. And then one night you're sitting in the garage and you're like, why did I feel that way? Or where did this emotion come from? And that's just me. I don't know. I sit out here and spin. I just sit here like, I've got to ask people about this, So, too cool. All right. So you get the emotion, you get the drive, you go to boot camp, you get through boot camp in the minimum time necessary. Who's your unit? You came in as a reservist.
Yes,
that's right. So that's where my tail and your tail diverge, and that's what I want to know about.
Yeah, sure. So I did boot camp and School of Infantry on the West Coast. So San Diego, Camp Pendleton. Did School of Infantry at Camp Pendleton. So it was a mix of maybe 10% reservists and 90% active duty.
Right.
And on the day you leave or graduate SOI, I remember there were, a bunch of us reservists were sitting there with our sea bags ready to go fly back to the airport. And everybody else was getting on a bus to go over to Horno because that's where they were going to First Marines over there. And but that is kind of the like up to that point, I think, between reservists and active duty, everybody's on the same track or the same path. And then after that, that's where you split. So I was part of 1st Battalion, 24th Marines, which is based out of, Michigan, Ohio. So Alpha Company, the company I was a part of, was here in Grand Rapids. So came back to Alpha Company. There was a Navy Marine Corps Reserve Center here in town where we would do our headquarters and everything was. So that's where I reported to with, I think there were 3 or 4 other guys that were heading there at the same time. But then it's, you check in your unit, which I think is similar to everywhere else. But then, they basically say, hey, our next drill is 2 weeks from now. Show up Thursday night or whatever it is. And then you're on that rotation of once, basically 1 weekend a month, and then the 2 weeks in the summer that you hear about on the commercials. Now we got there it was early November, right before the ball. So we had the ball. That's a weekend.
And this is 01? Oh no, this is 02?
No, this is 02. Sorry.
02. Okay, just trying to keep in my head.
Delayed program. Yeah, delayed entry program. So I went in the summer of 02. November of 02, got to the unit, had the Marine Corps ball was my first, training drill or whatever, where we did a bunch of admin stuff. And then the ball, I don't think we had any training in December. And then January, I remember I was visiting some relatives out in Iowa and got a call right when I got back saying, hey, I think we're getting activated. So this was January of 03.
Yep.
And within a few days, they said, hey, by, whatever day it was, Thursday at midnight, be in 2,400 hours, be in, report in, we're getting activated. So that was like, telling my job that I'm leaving, and start to get ready. And that was during the workup. Everybody was starting to do the workup for the Iraq war, the initial invasion. So we assumed that we were going to be a part of that as well. And then after we did about a month of, I call it training. It was basically white space training, where you're trying to fill the time with, you're taping out rooms on the floor of the gym so you can do clearing and stuff like that. But it was not a high-speed training package at all. But then we got sent to Djibouti, which was anti-terrorist base there that the U.S. had established shortly after 9/11 in East Africa. So we got sent there, and we're basically force protection for the entire time we were there, which was
for the base in Djibouti.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So that our company was the security force there. And then they had a few Air Force people with much nicer Humvees and air conditioning they were responsible for the airstrip, but we were responsible for the rest of the base. So, yeah, we were there from February to August, so I don't know, 6 or 7 months, and then we were replaced and rotated back. So during that time, we were over there. That was the entire Iraq invasion. The mission accomplished. Thumbs up. Everything's good. It seemed like, that was all over, and everybody was heading back home at that point.
Seemed like it wouldn't be 22 years later,
eh? Right, exactly.
No, I felt the same way. In 04, I was graduating high school. I thought I was going to miss the war, watching y'all in the shock and awe campaigns and watching y'all go. Well, in 04, I was actually in December, so I probably wasn't watching much of you guys. I was in boot camp, but.
Well, yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, but you would have been boot camp, School of Infantry, like during the big Fallujah push thing.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So that was my inspiration, watching y'all, I guess, or watching them. So
it was me. Yeah.
Yeah. 1-4, and there was a couple of different elements in there, I think, but 3-7, the Thunder in third took them down. Maybe that was it. Okay. Cool. So there's a couple of things I want to understand. The first thing is, how much time did you get from being notified that you're getting activated till the time you had to report in?
Boy, that time it was days.
Oh, really?
I want to say it was 3 or 4 days. Yeah.
So if you have a wife and family, it's like, hey, I'm here, and then, hey, I'm out.
Right. It was very different the next time around when we went to Iraq, because then it was we had a much more notice. But at that point, it was within, I think it was less than a week.
It was just bang, bang. The U.S. was making moves and trying to build a package on the way. Yeah. Gotcha. So you go over, you do force protection, Alpha Company for Djibouti, which a lot of people know that we own Djibouti now, with as long as we've done it. But at the time being new, different standards to protect it, different. They didn't have all the stuff that they have now. So, And so you come back from that one. How did you feel about that? Good deployment, bad deployment?
It was fascinating, just being a different country and culture and climate.
It's hot
period.
there.
I think, it's very, very hot. But I think, for the most part, if I were to speak for the broader group or the broader company, it kind of felt like we missed out. It was kind of like we were the second stringers who got sent to this place where, nobody really heard of or cared about when everybody else was in Iraq. And so, that was it, or that was most of it. But we also came back with a certain level of pride and swagger that maybe wasn't quite warranted, of just saying, hey, we deployed overseas. And then, the new guys come in, you're like, you guys don't know shit.
Your boots.
But I was talking to General Nicholson when he was out here a few weeks ago, and he said something that was funny. He said, There's nothing more dangerous in the Marine Corps than a lance corporal with a sea service deployment ribbon. That's who we were. We were a bunch of, mostly boots ourselves that had been overseas, and not to downplay what we had done, but we kind of played it up.
No, but I mean, there's honor in that. It's your first activation. It's your first deployment. You actually get to, like you said, experience this different culture, which I think that regular Americans that do not leave America don't understand what a shock it is to visit another culture, especially in Africa or the Middle East or the Far East. It's a different world completely than what they know. And to be honest with you, I mean, we could talk about it later, but some of the moral injury or the things that I suffered from was part and parcel due to their culture. The lack of value they place on human life, what they'll do to mentally disabled children, what they'll do to their own boys, that kind of stuff. And when you see that for the first time and you confront it, I seen it for the first time in Iraq as a junior squad leader. And I mean, that is the stuff. Like, killed tons of people in Mars. It doesn't, like, I got past that. The fact that, the ones that deserved it. But man, what they do to their children and how they, human life having no value, that stuff just gnawed at me, gnawed at me, And they believe that shit just as much as we believe our shit. And that's another thing that just gnaws at me, you know what I mean? So, anyway, we can move past it, but that's something I always like to touch on, or people just don't realize the difference in culture, and that's okay, and it can be okay, and we can learn from each other instead of having to kill each other off. Yeah. But okay, so you come back from that, you go back into your normal routine of once a month and 2 weeks out of the year.
Right. Yeah. And so we got back.
At what point do you learn? Was it early that you learned when you got back, or later that you learned of the upcoming deployment?
It was later, and I truly don't know when exactly, because it's the same rumor mill that everybody else has. There's some truth to some of it, but so all the way, we got back in August 2003. I think by 2005 we knew we were going to be deployed, or we thought we would be. It was just, is it going to be in the spring? Is it going to be in the fall? Is it going to be next year? So we had, maybe probably, I guess I could say we had more notice than we could effectively use, because you just didn't know if it was actually accurate or not. Yeah. But then it was I think by early 2006, we had a pretty good understanding, and partly because, there's a certain number of training hours or whatever that you have as a reservist for the year. That means, you get these 12-month-long training packages, or whatever. I'm sorry, weekend training packages. And by the early 2006, we were compressing all of that with the assumption that we're going to get activated in May or the end of May or June. So we basically did front-loaded all of our training to the front end of 2006. So then it started becoming real. We even did our annual training. We went out to division schools out at Camp Pendleton, and they put us through those training packages. So it started to become very real. I mean, as a
the training package was way better than your Djibouti one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was before we even were officially activated. We were already doing better training, getting better gear, equipment, and that sort of thing. And then once we actually did, get the notice, which was, I don't know, I'm sure a couple months in advance. And then once we showed up, which was, I think, right around June 1st or right after Memorial Day, 2006, it was full on, hardcore training out at Camp Pendleton. Basically the same package that any unit that was going out there.
Squad ranges, team ranges, things like this.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. They did a lot with, different scenarios where they'd have actors or whatever come in and you have to engage with them. They'd be locals, or they'd be, somebody else you'd be talking to, and then a fake IED would go off and you'd have to respond to that.
Sure. Did they do, was it called Mojave Viper then?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So did they do the role players with amputated arms and shit like that for you guys?
Yeah. That was one of the eye openers. Like, that's something that stuck out to me in the training where we were, and I don't remember if this might've been at 29 Palms when we were there. But either way,
it was 29 Palms.
Yeah. This mocked up village. you hear a big explosion go off, and they kind of said, okay, go over here. You got to respond and set up security. We walked in this room where, they had people who were just amputees that had fake blood squirting out of their arms or
Yep.
legs or whatever, and had to respond. And not only, our initial response was just like,
shock.
what's going on? And then to start to get the wheels turning, like, okay, we got to help these people. Okay, we also need to set a security cordon. Like, we can't just all sit in this room and try to put these people back together. We've got to make sure that we're actually responding the way we should. So
sure. I thought that was some of the greatest,
mm-hmm.
At the time for me, I hadn't done live tissue training or any of that.
Right.
And so that was just, as far as desensitizing to, drama or horror or blood,
right.
that was really good. And I think it served people well after they went through that. So, very cool training there. And so, that's the same stuff as the fleet's doing. And so they're prepping you guys for war for sure. They do. Good.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. And so when do you actually push out on that deployment? If you were doing that in September, I'd say what, before the end of the year?
Excuse me. Yeah. August and September was when we were at 29 Palms doing the Mojave Viper and everything. It was actually the end of September that we left. That we flew.
Okay.
Because I think I arrived with some of the advanced party. So they sent a group of us, basically squad leaders and other leaders. They sent us out about a week ahead to start the turnover with the existing unit. And they were that I got in September 28th, I think, was the first time we got from Kuwait into Iraq and started that process.
Check. And now at this point, you're a sergeant and you're a squad leader?
I was a corporal then.
Corporal and a squad leader?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep.
Check. And
leader.
so so that's doing good work right there. The first deployment a couple years earlier, you were GP falling in a team?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they basically broke us into squads because I was part of a weapons platoon. I'm an assaultman.
Okay.
So they basically broke us into rifle squads or whatever for security duty, and really did the same thing. They turned our weapons platoon basically into a fourth platoon when we got over there or before. So I had my squad was made up of a mix of machine gunners, mortarmen, and a couple of us assaultmen once we got there. So that was kind of the makeup of the squad. And
you guys are running M4s with your extra weapons, or just taking extra weapons when you needed them?
We took them when we needed them. So at first we kind of left all the machine guns crew mounted. But after we started getting into it, one of my guys, I write about him in the book, but we call him Potato. He's just a classic good old boy, ornery as can be, but man, he backed up everything he said, with performance. And so he just said, I'm taking the damn 240. I don't care. So he just, dismounted it from the Humvee and started carrying that. And that was his primary weapon. He didn't carry anything else. He didn't carry a 9mm or anything like that. Was it. We had one time in the Chow Hall, we were at El Takadum, which was one of the bigger bases west of Fallujah, I think kind of between Fallujah and Ramadi, but we were in the Chow Hall, which we were, wild Indians compared to what they had at the Chow Hall there. And some poor Lance Corporal, female Lance Corporal had to come tell him hey, you can't have a crew served weapon in here. He's like, what? It's my gun.
There's no crew. It's just me.
We had to negotiate and say, all right, yeah. But
funny.
We didn't carry the SMAs with us much. We didn't have much need for them. The mortarmen took those out quite a bit. And they also got attached to other platoons.
They're just running handheld 60s.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're great. If you had a good mortar crew that can run handheld, serves well in a gunfight for sure.
Right.
And so, so you guys break down. You're running weapons guys as a provisional rifle squad. And get into it from the time you get into zone and your guys get in and you start operating. What's the op tempo? What's the cycle?
Sure. So, roughly as a company, I think it was about a 1 week cycle where you do, the first job my squad had was all security, and then we would do log runs or logistics runs back to Camp Fallujah to pick up, chow or mail or whatever else. You would do that for about a week, and then I think QRF for about a week, and then another week of what we call long operations, where you go out and operate out of a patrol base.
Yep.
Where basically, I mean, looking back at it now, it's one of the things I think about, like, okay, I would not, if this were happening in my country, I wouldn't be okay with it. But we would just go out, pick a house, and say, hey, thanks, owner. We're going to be here for the next week. Here's a piece of paper to go get paid by the government in Fallujah. We're going to be here, so hit the road. And so, but we would, then use that house as a patrol base.
Sure.
And kind of operate in that area. And then I think the fourth one was maybe short ops, where it was more like day patrolling inside and around the wire and stuff like that. So I might be wrong on some of the details, but generally it was kind of set up like that.
That's the cycle. And generally there is a cycle. Like we had like a guard post, a patrol and assault, section of the month, and then like an OP cycle. And so we would rotate like 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, unless something big came up that the CO needed, different squads to operate together for whatever reason.
Yeah, bigger operation or something.
Yeah, something like that might pull it away, but generally it was that 10, 10, and 10, and you got through that month, and then 10, 10, and 10. And like, no matter what the cycle is, and I would recommend this to junior Marines, for sure, is no matter what the cycle is, break that thing down in your head. Like, okay, if it's 10, 10, and 10, it's like, okay, by the end of each cycle, it's a month. Okay, and they can't stop time. So if like there was ways we played with time over there, it wasn't always a calendar. You know what I mean? So and it's just another way to make it bearable.
Yeah. 6 or 7 guard duty rotations and you're out of here. Like it's makes it seem quick.
Yeah. And
I got to the point. I think I learned this. This is back to boot camp, but I think I learned, just get to the next meal. Like get to the next chow. Like that, and chow. That's what it was over in over in Iraq too. It was like let me get the next 6 hours and we'll see where we're at then.
Yeah. And did that mindset remain your entire time through?
I think so. I mean, it was just hard. I think especially early on when we first got there. I mean, it was pretty heavy action right away. Right when we arrived was the start of Ramadan, which for most Muslims, it doesn't mean any. Well, they, it's their holy celebration. But for some of the people we were fighting against, it meant that they were even, they stepped up the attacks even more. And I think part of it was if you were part of the jihad, you could eat during the day. You didn't have to fast.
Yep. So
it was like they almost picked up more fighters during the Ramadan time. So it was pretty intense. And I think early on I think I had to keep myself from thinking about the end or like, thinking about it being done at some point, because it's like I just felt like I needed to be dialed in and just focus on the next, like I said, 6 or 12 hours. Couldn't really put too much stock in when we might be leaving 7 months later.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I think my mindset was, I loved the patrol and assault cycle, so I would always yearn for that. Yeah. Right? So it's like 14 more days and I get to go out. Yeah. 12 more days and we're going out on patrol. I just felt like I always felt like sitting on guard duty on the cop or sitting on like an OP cycle. And we did the same thing. Hey, we're taking this, go live with your cousins or whatever, go see somebody about money, but I need this house for the next however many. Yeah. And I just always felt so vulnerable there. Like here I sit, I have to not only sit this, but I also have to support my own patrolling effort for, close patrols to make sure nobody's, sneaking up on us, and it's like that happened to Lima Company and I think maybe a squad or two in my own company. And it's like, so it was necessary, you know what I mean? Yeah. But you're just sitting there. I just felt like at least if I'm out on patrol with my rifle, with my fucking squad, nothing put past my squad. I just felt so much more, I guess, offensive instead of reactionary was what I liked better.
No, I could totally relate to that. I mean, we got towards towards the midpoint and even after that, where actually after a few months, my squad got moved, or my platoon got moved to a platoon base. So there were just 3 squads, and our platoon commander and platoon sergeant. And so we got into a even quicker rotation where it was like, a couple of days of guard duty, a couple of days of patrolling. And after a while, we almost kind of worked it out where we're like, we'd just rather stay patrolling. Like, we want to be out there. And it wasn't just me making that decision for my squad. Like, I think to a man, we would have said, I'd rather be out there having some sort of control over our destiny than just sitting here in a tower. And one of the other squads in my platoon, God bless them, they were happy to volunteer for guard duty. So we swapped out more than
Well, you have that, though. You have those squads or those guys, and they serve a great purpose. They do.
No, yeah.
There's no shade being thrown, but if you have guys that want to do something, they will be better at it. If they are passionate about doing a thing, anything, doesn't fucking matter what it is, talent management, right? If they're passionate about it, they will put their best effort into it. If they hate it, they won't. So I'd rather have the guy that's like balls to the wall, give me a 240 and let's go on a squad patrol, than the guy that's like, I'd rather stay back if there's an option. It's like, then you ain't feeling it. You need to stay back, So that's cool. And so you say that happened after a while, and you also said that it was pretty actionable pretty quick. Now, what does that mean? Day 1, day 2, first patrol?
Yeah, it was the first patrol I was on. It was kind of one of the turnovers where you got, left seat, right seat, going out with the outgoing unit, and they were just showing us a tour of the AO. So it was 125, so it was another reserve battalion. We were 124, so they were based out of New England, Boston, that area.
Okay.
It sounded like they all had funny accents to us. No, but they were solid guys, and they were kind of giving us a tour of the AO. And nobody would admit it. I think we were a little bit lost. We were way on the outskirts and kind of doing these canal roads south of Fallujah, sort of on the edge of the desert. And I was in the lead Humvee with a few other guys, and we had an IED blow up, 15, 20 feet in front of us, in front of the Humvee. It just partially detonated, which was really great for us. So it was like, you could see it. It was more like a grenade blew up in the road than a full-fledged 120 millimeter mortar, arty round. But and then we got out. We found the command wire that was leading up to it. We started searching the area. We actually found the guy's sandals, the trigger man. We found his sandals. He ran off, and then we started taking pot shots. Like, we call it a sniper. You never know if it's a sniper or just some idiot shooting. But started taking round snapping in, and that was, it was just like, oh wow, we've been out here for about an hour and this is happening already. So eventually, EOD came and cleared it and pulled the rest. I don't remember if they blew it in place or if they just pulled the other rounds out of the ground and threw them in the back of their truck. But we moved on from there. But it was, it was similar to that quite a few times. We'd run into something, or we'd be out on patrol and, take a burst of machine gun fire, or, start taking pot shots, or find an IED that we didn't have to wait until
cordon off
cleared.
Yeah. And so that's in the opening days. So you're doing RIP at this point, left seat, right seat, and you're already taking it. Roger that. Yeah, that's pretty fucking quick. And so when your squad shows up in country in the main element, how does that conversation go with the fellas?
Yeah, I remember they were a little less impressed than because that was just the advanced party. So I was telling them, about what happened. They're like, so wait, it didn't even blow up all the way? And I was like, well, no, but it was real shit in there. So, as you kind of do, they were giving me a hard time about it. But by the time they got in and we started operating as a squad, everybody was dialed in. You had and I think the training we had done really did prepare us well for it. Like, so that it was like the first time, we started taking fire from somewhere. It really was just a reaction, or it was a response more than a reaction. It was like, okay, here's what we do when this happens. Like,
yes.
And in the same time, the first time we found an IED that hadn't been blown up, Same thing, like, okay, let's set up the cordon, let's call it in, make sure that we've got good, good security, and we're watching the places where a trigger man might be, because there might be additional whatever. So at least in a lot of ways, it felt like, okay, we're starting to, or we're just continuing to practice the things that we've already learned. Now, things also got more complex after that. So there were times where it's like, okay, we're setting up here. Okay, we're getting shot at from here. All right, we're heading to this place to check it out. And then we're taking fire from a different location. So you add in a lot of complexity. And sometimes you just don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
You just got to kind of muddle through it. But,
yeah. Tell me about the first gunfight with your squad.
Sure. So it was about a month into it, like a full on. I mean, up to that point, we had found some IEDs. We'd taken fire multiple times, but you just can't tell from where it's coming from.
Yep.
But we were patrolling, had just gone through a village, and we had another squad that was doing vehicle checks, or a vehicle checkpoint on the road a couple hundred yards away from us.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just coming across the road, and the insurgents opened up, and they were mostly focused on that other squad. So they were shooting at them. They had a 7-ton parked down the road. And so started taking fire, multiple RPGs, machine gun fire. Nobody got hit miraculously, because there was a lot of lead being thrown around. But we were almost in a position where we could respond right away. So we knew, very loosely, the direction that it was coming from. It was hard to say exactly, it didn't have like telltale muzzle flashes at that point. But we started, we basically said, here's the point we think it's coming from, open fire, and start moving that way. So we moved as a squad in that direction. But at one point, and I write about this because I'm embarrassed by it, but it happened. At one point, we got to these, thick reeds. We were kind of on the edge of Euphrates, and I just kind of kept going, crept through, and then I found these two guys leaned over working on something, and I thought, man, this is it. Like, they're working on a machine gun or an IED or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I gotta blast these guys. But there was something about it where I was just thinking, I don't know if that's it or not. So, and that was when I started to become aware, like, I'm alone. There's nobody else in.
Oh, yeah.
There's nobody else in here with me. And so, number one rule of being a squad leader, they don't even tell you this because it's obvious, is don't lose your squad when you're getting a firefight. But somehow I just moved on without them and didn't tell them. So I radioed the guys, and they were 50 or 100 meters outside of the weeds. But we ended up taking those two guys in. They were working on some sort of water pump or something. So,
okay.
They had a fairly, it still seemed a little bit suspicious what they were doing, but I'm very thankful I didn't just open fire.
Yeah, put three in their back.
That would have been a tough one to explain, mostly to myself more than anybody else, what happened.
Yeah. And so, okay, this is the next emotion I want. You guys come back from that patrol, and then as a squad, I would assume you sit down and have a chat, or you at least see your squad afterwards. What was that emotion, and what was that conversation like?
Yeah, those conversations were always lighter than you might think. It was kind of you come through something like that, and mostly it was just, hey, we made it. Like, we got some stuff to work on. Here's some things we could do differently. Like, everybody was pretty open about that, and able to share, here's where I was, and I could have done this differently, or should have done this. Kind of the classic after action report type things. But mostly it was, it was kind of the euphoria of making it through that sort of thing, and you could. I don't know. It was interesting because in training you could just second guess every decision that somebody ever made, and and you would be second guessed. It would be you'd have a gunny there, or somebody just saying, "Hey, you should have done this. Why didn't you do that?" But out there, it was like, "Hey, we did it and we made it back. Like, all right, good on you. We'll figure it out next time. Let's do this differently." But it was just a much different feeling than nitpicking every decision that everybody made.
Sure. Check. And then as a squad leader, are you reporting to a company click or an intel rep about what you've seen, how things went down, tactics, techniques, and procedures? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. So we had a platoon commander who was very he was former intel, two deployments before he'd been an intel officer, during the invasion, and then he did another deployment in, I think it was late 2004 into 2005, where they operated with a very strong intel focus, because they start to realize counterinsurgency. You need to know the insurgents, what their tactics and everything are, but then also understand like this network that's supporting them, which is the local population. And so we would, do a debrief with him. He would feed a lot of that back to our company. We had like a company intel cell that they were good. They maybe weren't as good as they thought they were, but they were actually very helpful in kind of compiling and just doing the work of understanding who's in which area and what they're doing.
Sure.
And who, how we can start to work to target the network that supports them.
Yeah. Very well. All right. So moving on, you guys stay in or around Fallujah the whole time, right?
Right. So our battalion was based in Fallujah. So we had a couple companies in the city itself. We were just on the other side of the Euphrates from the city across. Yep. So it was, the Blackwater Bridge was one of the bridges that you could basically see every day. And then, we were there the whole time. I went to Baghdad towards the end of the deployment, but that was to testify in the Iraqi criminal court against some insurgents that we captured. So other than that, we were in Fallujah the entire time.
Check. Now, I'm just going to come right out. I'd like to hear about some of your more intense situations that you've had. We've covered the first one. If you give me a couple of instances where, let's talk about, one or two where things went extremely right, and then let's talk about a couple maybe that didn't go right. And so some of these fellows can, TDG, hear them, work them, and work out their best ways. That's one thing I want the young guys to take away from this show is there's hundreds, at this point, maybe more than hundreds of TDGs they can walk away with, and they can run with their guys. So give me a couple of goods and a couple of bads maybe.
Sure. So another bad, if I could stick on that theme, other than losing my squad, was right around that time. Might have been the same day, to be honest. We were sweeping through a village, two squads, one on either end, and we were going kind of working towards each other. Yeah. And the mandate then was, hey, we're taking fire from this village. Basically pretty consistently on our patrol base. Everybody's allowed to have an AK-47, but like we're going through and we're confiscating every weapon we find. So check. I was on one end with my squad, another squad was on the other, and we were moving towards each other. And I knew we were getting close, but didn't really recognize where the other squad was. Came to another little cluster of houses. One of the, there was a man standing there. We said, hey, bring your Kalashins or whatever we call them. He said, okay, yep. Right. He pointed to the house and he went running over there, and we thought, okay, he's going to get the weapon. We were keeping an eye on him, but there was nothing that was too alarming about what he was doing. It seemed like he was just complying with what we said. So he came out and he held it out and we said, yep, come on over. And, he's walking towards us and we hear a gunshot. And so we're like, okay, everybody down, sniper, what's going on? We knew it didn't come from him. It's snapped in like a round that was fired from somewhere else. But we didn't know where it came from. So we're looking around, and I know I got this guy 30 yards away or whatever with an AK-47. So I motioned to him to come over to us because I'd rather have him controlled than over there. Sure. And so he stood up and started running, and hear another, round snapping. Like, shit, what's going on? So we're all looking around, trying to figure it out. And then I look over about 150 yards away, a few Marines from the other squad poking their heads up above one of the rooftop parapets. And I'm like, wait a second. So then I hear on the radio, they're saying like, hey, Jansen, we just, saw a guy coming towards you with an AK-47. We shot him. He's down. Like,
no.
Shit. Like, So I look over at the guy, and it doesn't look like he's hit. So I was like, okay, don't shoot. We told that guy to come over here. And so he, finally I kind of motioned for him to come, and he was pretty hesitant.
Yeah, he's like,
point.
"Fuck that, dude."
Yeah, understandably so. But he came over, finally he came over and gave it to us.
He wasn't hit.
No, he wasn't hit. They thought they'd hit him. We gave him a hard time. The
I
guy
was gonna say, I hope you gave him a hard time.
You're not a good shot.
150 meters, dog.
No, right.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those situations.
I could see where that would get lost in translation, man. If if you guys aren't having active comms and they don't know you're working this cat,
right?
And they just think they're playing the hero and overwatching you from getting smoked. Yeah.
They see a random guy walk out of a house with an AK-47 and start coming towards us, and they don't know if we can see that guy or not.
Sure.
He could just be coming around the corner ready to open fire. So it was just a situation where it's like, it kind of taught us the lesson. We got to understand where we're at. And one of the things that we quickly moved to, so a lot of what we had trained to do is just operate all as a squad and, in 3 different fire teams, but all together.
Sure.
We moved together. And shortly after, within a month or so, we started doing
satellites. Yep.
So, which was that was very, very effective because you could have 3 squads, or I'm sorry, 3 teams all spread out a quarter mile apart, completely supporting each other, and we got to the point where we would use one team as kind of a bait, where they would operate in the open, and then you might catch insurgents coming around the corner or trying to sneak up to them. Sometimes we did it accidentally, and it just worked out that way. But other times we would do that, and then we would start to do that with two squads together. So then we were operating, but early on we were just kind of bumped into each other and had this incident where thankfully that guy, he wasn't injured. And probably had a good story to tell afterwards, but
now,
it worked out in the end.
Is this a sister element from your platoon?
The other squad?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so you're seeing them when you go back to base.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah.
We talked about it at the patrol base that night. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I laugh because that's funny to me. That's not funny though. Understanding your battlefield geometries and understanding adjacent units and comms plans. That's kind of a freak thing to me that would line up and they would be able to have your Overwatch and then see this guy and not see the conversation. But I get it. I 100% get it. Yeah. And did you have squad internal with them comms?
We did. Yeah. We had the PRR radios. I think we're all on the same channel. So, and they might have even announced they were there. I just missed it. We were talking. So,
well, you're doing work over there. It's understandable.
Yeah, you mentioned it's funny, but it's not. But that was the first reaction when we got back. It was, "Hey, damn it, Morris, what are you doing? How could you not hit that guy?" Because it worked out, we could joke about it. It would have been a different conversation if
he was a good shot. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So,
well, he had a weapon.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would go because without comms, it looks like you're overwatching and covering down on your sister element that's about to get raked. And so
right, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and without us, play by playing what we're doing, it's even
Bro, there were several times I was in situations where squads went into a building and you watched them and then there was gunfire erupted and you're like and then you see them come out the other side and it's like
right.
They might have been shooting a dog. Sometimes it was humans, but yeah.
But your initial reaction is to start shooting if somebody else is shooting.
At least get eyes on or move to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a great one for people to learn for people to learn from for sure. Those freak things. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. That's Murphy for you right there.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. What else?
I think of a couple of times where it worked out, where I think it worked as we wanted it to. Well, I'm not sure if I can completely say it worked as we wanted to, but it worked out, I guess. And that's, we were this was a situation that was really intense. So we were going this village on the far end of our AO that was never, so it was never visited. Probably hadn't been any U.S. troops there or Iraqi troops there, months or years. And so we did a big company-wide push to really, go house to house and clear the village, and just, search everything.
Company push. That's a big push.
Mm-hmm. So we get there 4 a.m. This was a time where I volunteered to say, hey, we'd rather be the searching element than the overwatch element. Like I don't want to sit on top of a house all day and watch this. So
yeah.
So it was the second house we went to. So 4:10 in the morning, whatever. And one of my guys says, hey, there's, I just walked in this room. There's 3 guys in here. I think they got AKs under their pillows. And, at that point, looking back on it, I should have been more alarmed than I was. Part of it, I think, was just like the drudgery of like continuing. We had searched probably thousands of homes at that point. It's like, okay, well, whatever, we'll figure it out. So went in the room, started yelling at the guy the guys to stand up. Eventually, 2 of them do, and they're closest to the door, kind of off to our left, and yelling at the third guy who's on the far wall. And just as he stood up, he had his hands under a blanket. As he stood up, he kind of dropped something, and just saw, under the surefire light that it was a grenade, and he tried to pick it back up and pull the pin. And so me and the other guy in the room with me, Ozzy, both shot him, and then grabbed the other 2 guys and threw them out and searched them and everything. But it was just a situation where, should have reacted slightly sooner, but also it was a situation where it just worked out. I mean, we killed the guy that tried to kill us, and we took the other 2 guys prisoner and or detained them. And so
that's good. That's good discipline and control right there, because I would probably say 8 out of 10 line, company, platoon, straight leg grunts would have shot all 3 of them at that point.
Well, and
I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, because probably those guys were all bad.
For sure. I mean, it was very clear afterwards. We found more stuff. I think, honestly, I remember shooting. I remember that very clearly. And then I remember grabbing one of the guys, and I don't remember the next, I don't know how many minutes. Like, it was just like one of those times, like, adrenaline overpowers your memory.
You guys kill him instantly?
The other guys, what's that?
Was that guy dead instantly?
He was. I mean, we shot him, 5 or 6 times in that.
Just shut him down. Nice.
Round or that big of an area. So it was but we didn't know that either, and I wasn't taking chances. So I would actually went back in after that and shot him again.
Got him with that box drill, boy.
What's that?
I said, get him with that head shot.
Yeah, and I mean, there's you could make the claim like that wasn't the right thing to do, and probably wasn't, but in the moment, I
don't make that claim. Hey, I know what they did in Fallujah to people and booby trapping their bodies and everything else.
Right. It's in the moment, it's just like, hey, I've got a lot to worry about. This is one less thing I'm going to worry about right now. And
especially if there's a grenade in there, who knows if you had more grenades, and you don't have to be too alive to throw a grenade. You know what I mean? So
right. That was the thought process. And we eventually ended up, kind of pulling him off of the grenade and then getting out just to make sure, because we didn't know, he might have pulled the pin and it was just laying on it and hadn't
spooned out.
Gone. So, but that was just the time. And then actually right after that,
is there anything you would have done differently on that one? Sorry to cut you off. I just didn't want, before we jumped ahead. Maybe you said that your alarm was a little bit weaker than it should have been.
Yeah,
it all worked out. I'm just trying to nitpick at this point.
No, I think, knowing what we knew, like, yes, Iraqis were allowed to have an AK-47 in the home. They didn't normally sleep with it under their pillow. There wouldn't be 3 guys sleeping with them under their pillows. Like, that's where, putting the pieces together is like, oh, no shit, they were insurgents. Like, we could have just tossed a couple grenades in there before walking in. I think I was pretty okay with putting myself at risk. I would have really there were 2 other guys, either with me there or standing in the door that that would have been if somehow, they were hurt or killed in that and I wasn't, like, that would have been really hard to deal with. Like, because that, I kind of went in based on my own stupidity, maybe is the way to put it. But I was willing to do that for myself. I didn't really want to do that for the guys. So it worked out for all of us. But
I would venture to say that your guys would say the same.
I think so.
Yeah. So it's all working out in there and anyway.
Yeah, right. We're still friends. So.
Yeah. It didn't kill you, bro.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, dude. That's intense though, dude. Grenades, mortars, RPGs, a lot of that fire and forget weapon where you just don't know what's going to happen, man. That's intense. And I never faced an enemy grenade. That's threw some friendly ones, but never faced an enemy throwing them back, at my direction. And that's
right.
That's one of those things you want to put down instantly for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think whether you're throwing them or you're receiving them or they're throwing them, like, you're close.
You're too fucking close, bro.
you're too close. Like, that's funny. It's kind of once you throw tossing grenades back and forth, like, you're closer than you probably need to be. So.
Yeah, dude.
But that's
totally
what it is.
agree. Totally agree. Fuck yeah, dude. That's pretty intense. Were there parochial attitudes or personalities geared towards you guys because you were reservists when you deployed? Or were you just operating with other reservists, so it was, a non-issue?
Oh, sure. Within the Marines or the military?
Yeah, like, so you guys show up in Fallujah and you're a reservist and you're moving through and you're taking, lines over. Did you ever take them over from straight leg infantry or army?
No, not when we took over when we were there, because it was a reserve battalion that we replaced. They took them over from it would have been a mainline infantry battalion. But it really, once we were active and in California doing the same training package that everybody else did before they deployed overseas in Mojave Viper and stuff, it really didn't feel like there was much. It didn't feel like we were set apart or different or looked down upon. Partly maybe we didn't hear about it, but also, like, once you're over there and you're operating, like, the insurgents don't care. Like,
operating's operating, doesn't matter at that point.
They're shooting the same or trying to kill you the same. So
yeah. I just didn't know if you had the parochialism within the ranks, and I would hope not, obviously, because we all make fun of each other, and that's all well and good, right? And we even make fun of other branches. But I've worked with Army, I've worked with Marines, I've worked with a lot of people, and that shouldn't be a thing, because just like you said, the insurgents don't care, and they're trying to kill you the same, and you either win or you don't win.
Yeah. No, but if you think about all the support elements there at the time, the engineers, the Amtrak crewmen, I write about that a little bit. We had some animosity between them, but not because we were reservists, but just because we thought they were assholes. But
maybe they were assholes.
Yeah, no, they definitely were. But
nobody wants to be in a fucking Amtrak anyway, right? That's already a bad mood. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. But no, we really didn't feel. Other times, whether we were training on our annual training at Lejeune or something like that, or Pendleton, you could feel it sometimes then, but it was like, whatever, we're doing the same stuff right now. Like, and it's warranted. Like, if you're doing the same training package, or the same intensity of training year round versus somebody who's just coming into it after doing it once a month, you do have a different level of proficiency and a different level of intensity. Now, I think we caught up pretty quick.
No, yeah.
Going through the same. Because if you think about it, a battalion that just gets back and starts doing it's half new guys anyway, more than that, probably. So you've got we had a decent, all of our leaders had deployed at least once to Iraq at that point.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about our company commander, platoon commanders, A lot of our squad leaders came from a different battalion out of, I think it was 224 that had deployed a year or two before. So we had a decent number of people who had deployed before. And yeah, there's always people
That's good.
who experienced it and not.
That's good. Well, there's nothing to designate you guys apart from anybody else anyway, nor should there be.
Yeah.
Nor should there be. So, yeah, that's good. I've worked with some Army reservists that were absolute rock stars as far as their competency with their weapons and their engagement and stuff like that. And then, and also some Marine reservists. So, yeah, I always ask the question because I think it's a warranted question. I think there's a lot of stupid people within the ranks that would look down upon somebody for any reason that they could. The pogue this, pogue that, weekend warrior this, weekend warrior that. You hear it all the way through your career. And then I operate with these people and they're fucking warriors. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't really understand it.
And a lot of times the people that are talking the loudest are shitbags, no matter what part of it they're in. You know?
Yeah, or the ones that did the least. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, this is the next question. Kind of transition a little bit. Is there anything else you want to cover that you wanted to cover, as far as the combat goes?
I don't think so. I think one thing that's probably worth mentioning is, like, while we were there, we started to see the local tribes really started to turn against the Al-Qaeda-backed insurgents and started to ally with us, and that made all the difference in the world. Like that's like the gold or the holy grail of counterinsurgency is when you get like the local people to start taking ownership and also to fight against the outside insurgents. So that transition was at times terrifying because it was like, well, these guys with AK-47s and black ski masks they're on our side. They're good. These other ones, not so much. Like they're still our enemy. And we knew that some of the people that were allied with us were former insurgents. Like there was no way to get around it. They were, there was no 25-year-olds in Fallujah who were neutral for, the 3 or 4 years before that. But it made a tremendous difference to start getting, actionable intelligence from them, and just to also start to really build up build into their ownership of it. Because, we as Americans can't own the security situation of another country, at least long term.
Not forever.
No, right. And so that was added some intricacies, but it was really really cool to see that while we were there and see how it started to build, with oncoming deployments who basically said, hey, we didn't have anything going on in Fallujah. Like it was basically a safe city a year or two later.
Yeah, y'all turned it. You were at the end of turning it, at least. And that's a beautiful thing because not many people get to see that. I never got to see it, but I've had two people on the show. You make the third, I believe, that got to see the full circle come around, where the city went from shithole, guns blazing, multiple ambushes, and then got all the way back around. And the way one kid put it was that he was on post, and they had a shitty time in Ramadi, right? They had a terrible time in Ramadi in the beginning, and the people all left. So now it was basically what was in the city was what was fighting you, right? Yeah. And then he, we talked for a couple hours, and he comes around and he says, I'm standing in post, and I didn't understand it. All I seen was hundreds of people. He's maybe 1,000 people, and they're all walking down the streets. And he said, I instantly get my rifle, I get my dope in, and I'm looking at these people. He's like, and they're happy, and their kids, and their women. And he's like, that was Ramadi, Right. And that is an emotion that I would have wanted, to have because that's why you went. You went to liberate these people from those shitbags that were trying to take over a country. And when you see that city come back, that's why we go. That is the oppression or the spark in which we want to put in those people that said they're so much better than this if you would stand up and fight, right? Yeah. And so to any veteran that watches this that was in the GWAT campaign, that's what I try to tell them is, like, the second you start wondering what we did it for, it was because Ramadi came back. It was because Fallujah came back. It was because these people turned their entire allegiance over away from that and said, no, they're so much better for us. They're much better for our kids. Now, as the general would put it, we can only control what we can control while we're there.
Yeah. Yep.
And you can look at that how you want. Should we have even went? People might ask. And it's like, well, I still think.
Well, we did.
I still think so. We went. We did. You did great things. You fought honorably. But you ignited a spark inside of a whole generation of Iraqis and Afghani people that suggests that there's better for them. Now, if they can't wave the wind on that and grow that flame, that's not on us. You know,
right.
we gave them the spark. So just wanted to plug that in, so I wasn't trying to jump in. But
no.
All right, cool. So the next question may seem weird, and it just, however you want. But at what point did you realize that you were changed from your experience there?
That's a good question, because I don't know. I don't think I wanted to admit that I was. Especially coming back as we returned, like, for whatever reason I had in my head, like, I just want to prove that I didn't change. Like, this is just something I've been through, and it was just an experience I had, and move on from. And I don't think that was the right, because of course I changed from it. We change from anything we do, or are changed by it. And so I'm trying to think. I did, one thing that I recognized after coming back was just, there were some things, you have these ideas of masculinity and what it means to be a man and stuff. And I was able to, look at that with new eyes and be like, you know what? I was in combat, and I don't need to worry about it. Like, they could, somebody can knock me for drinking a margarita on the beach or something, but screw it. I like margaritas, and I'm going to drink them. Like,
yeah. Well, you didn't have anything to prove to anybody anymore.
Yeah, right. And now I did in other areas, and I tried to prove really hard. But, like, there were just a few things where I was just like, I don't give a shit what you think. Like, think what you want. I've been gotten through it. So, but I would say overall, I generally tried to just prove that I wasn't changed at all.
So do you feel like you changed at all?
Oh, absolutely.
So at what point did you realize that you couldn't just will it away from you? Right.
Honestly, it's been a process. So I left, we left in the spring, April of 2007, which was, 17 or 18 years ago. It's been kind of a slow evolution through that time. Like, it's been some of it. I just hit some points in my life, like I've shared before, that where I couldn't pretend like I had it all figured out. Like, I didn't have anything figured out. You hit that kind of rock bottom where it's just like, oh wow, yeah, I've been pretending like I can do all this and I can't. But then also, even just the process of writing was some of the first times where I, even just reading what I wrote, was like, holy shit. That's actually, this impacted me far more than I gave it credit for. Like, these are real things that I experienced. And it's almost like you can, part of the reason I didn't realize it is just, I kind of was able to just ignore it, is if you live detached enough, if you live a life detached and continue that, like, you can feel like, oh, nothing's going to touch me, because, you're just in going through combat, we all have to do that. You have to detach from your, your feelings and a lot of the things that you would generally want to feel, because you just can't deal with it. You got to operate. You got to, get to the next level, make sure that your team's okay, and work through it. I think I stayed detached for a long, long time, and it was a slow process of kind of getting it. I'm still going through that process right now of kind of understanding and, like, connecting with my heart a little bit more, where for a long time I was just detached from it.
Gotcha. There's one part in the book where you talk about counseling, and this may be skipping ahead a lot. And I just wanted to read a little bit of it, if you don't mind. You say, this is a situation where you're taking sniper fire seemingly for a while because it got to you to be aggravating and annoying almost. And you got a situation where you got a couple of, targets just after a shot that you have in the distance, and you go into that immediate action, and you say, I don't know why I did it. And this is, I believe, talking to the counselor at this point. She got you kind of flowing information out, and maybe that is his stuff that we wanted to fucking say so bad, but we didn't want to be the PTSD label. Or the PTS label, because we know all the good things that come with that at work. You get the negative stigma. Yep. People look at you like a broke piece of gear. They don't send you to schools anymore. They rip you off of staff promotion boards, those things. And those are real things. So now you're sitting with a counselor, and for the first time, maybe you're starting to talk about things that you had repressed for a long time. And before you know it, you're talking a lot. And so now you're talking to her, and you say, I don't know why I did it. I just pulled the trigger. And the counselor says, did you feel fear for your life? I guess so. I just wanted to stop them from shooting at us. I don't remember deciding to do it. I just sighted in and pulled the trigger. I'm glad that I missed. She looked down at her notebook, and we were both relieved to move on. Were there other times you feared for your life and the lives of those around you? Yeah, I guess. What caused most of your fear? Weirdly, fear was an emotion that I felt familiar with. Not in the classic sense, anyway. Just like every other emotion I experienced, I normally pushed it aside to favor the execution of tasks. There was no time for feelings when you were trying to lead a squad. Leading others forced me to put my fear aside. Not because I was brave, but because I was distracted. I was hit by fear one of the times in the village of Hawa. It was an intense, unexpected as any insurgent attack. We were in Amtrak's again, driving around trying to find a rally point to start the mission. The damn trackers couldn't follow directions and kept driving back and forth between points in the village. Later that night, we posted up in a home. Route clearance vehicles with their ground-penetrating radar and metal detection capabilities were digging in the road in front of our house. They found a buried artillery round and were disabling it. It was a section of the road that we'd crossed over several times throughout the day. I felt fear then, more accurately, panic. What if it had blown up one of the times we drove over it in the Amtrak earlier in the day? I didn't often reflect on the danger, but at the moment I couldn't help but envision the worst. My mind flashed to images of the burning hulk of an Amtrak, the Marines picking through pieces of wreckage to find body parts of my squad members. That was the time it caught up to me. The thing I feared the most was the possibility of getting one of my guys killed. Did you ever encounter dead bodies? Yeah, sometimes just pieces though. Do you ever think about harming yourself or others? Myself? No. So you're going through this with this counselor, and I would venture to say that any service member that's went downrange and done some work has had that conversation with a counselor at some point, and the guys who stick to that line seemingly get better as I watch. Sometimes not, sometimes not, but the guys that get down in it and do the work and want it to work, it seems to work. A lot of guys spend years, like what it sounds like you did, and definitely what I did, repressing this sensation, emotion, feeling, because we didn't want to be looked at as damaged gear. We didn't want the negative stigma. We wanted to show everybody that we were the Marine's Marine or the man's man, and that combat wouldn't change us. And for everybody out there, it doesn't matter how good you are at your job, the act of killing other human beings is not natural anymore. It used to be natural, and we've been removed from it a lot. And once you be removed from it a lot, there's things that come with that. And I think for a long time, I talk a lot on the podcast about the things that we were told growing up regarding questions to ask and not to ask, and people to ask them to and not to ask them to. Like when I was growing up, you didn't ever ask about war to somebody that had been to war. If they wanted to talk to you, they would tell you, and it would be obvious. But you never went up and asked them, did you kill anybody, or what did you go through, or what did you see? You also didn't talk about politics, and you didn't talk about religion. And what are the three things plaguing our nation right now? Politics, war, and religion. And so it's like we tried the whole, since the late 60s and early 70s, we tried this whole let's don't talk about it. And this is where we got. So maybe we should be talking about it, right? Maybe this is the shit that we should be talking about, understanding about, and learning from as we talk about it out loud in front of other people. And my hope is that talking about this, talking about people like you that wrote it down and went through it and did the work, went to real combat. And that's no shade at anybody, but that's real. When you're that close, when you're that in, that's as real as it gets. Outside of hand-to-hand knife fighting, that's as real as it gets. You're in the same room shooting somebody 6 times in the chest because he wanted to kill you with a grenade. That's as real as it gets. And if you can come out and get the work done and put your life back together, then I can say, hey, this is what you can do. I'll show you all of these guys, all of them. And likely if they're on my show, they've been through more combat than 90% of our soldiers and Marines. If they've been on my show, they've been there, which means that you can get there too. And they're showing you how to do it, right? I feel like if we do that over and over and over and over, and we can grow the show and get it out to a wider audience, then people like you with your story can help these future guys, and it will just keep helping them. But by not talking about it for a generation, what did we lose? What tradecraft did we lose? What counseling and what do they call it? Your coping mechanisms. What did we lose by never talking about it? We lost things.
Yeah.
And so I want to commend you on being transparent with putting this stuff in. Most guys won't put this stuff into the book. Most guys won't do it. And so when I got to that part in the book, which is deep in the book, and I'm not going to read this book for you. You need to go out and get this book. But when I got to that point in the book, I'm like, yes, this is what we need. We need people to say, I went there, I changed, and that's okay. And I got better, and I'm still leading a life, a successful company, successful, marriage, and it's possible. Was there bumps along the way? There's bumps along the way, and there always will be.
Yeah.
But is it possible? I'm showing people through you and through other people that this is a possible thing. It's just we need to mainstream it, right? What was it like for you in counseling? Because I know for me, I was reluctant to do it as well. I felt like a piece of shit for whatever reason. I just felt like, what kind of weak, sister am I to need to go talk to somebody about my brain, and how could they relate to me? All of those questions.
The wizard. That's what we called it back
then. Go seeing the wizard. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like, when that connotation is put in it from the beginning of your career, it's like, oh, you don't want to go see that guy,
No, right. It was, I wish it was something that I chose to do or willingly chose to do at first. But really, I mean, it stemmed out of my wife and my relationship and just the struggles we were having. Everything blew up, and it was a mess. And it was really, it was that rock bottom that kind of got me to say, okay, I couldn't pretend like everything was okay anymore. I gotta work through it. And actually, that conversation that you just read, that happened in a counseling session where I was there to talk about my marriage. Like I was there like, hey, what do I got to do to figure this shit out? Because I don't understand it. I don't know what my wife wants. I don't know what I want. And the counselor just asked a few subtle questions about, about my experience. And I was like,
what?
We don't need to talk about that. What does that have to do with anything? And then
everything,
it just started coming out. Where it's like, holy shit, I shot. I can't believe that happened, and I haven't. That passage you just read. It was where I shot at 2 shepherd boys. Like they were 2 kids that, 500 yards away, and I had no business pulling the trigger. I just did, and I missed. Thankfully, another time it was good to miss, but that I don't know that I had thought about that specific moment in the 8 or 9 years before that, at least consciously. Like it was in me because it came out right away. But,
yeah, sure.
But those sorts of things, it felt like it took a different kind of, like a real type of courage to say, hey, there's stuff that I don't understand, and bringing somebody else into that is really it feels really complicated and messy, and you can't control it, because if it's inside you feel like you can control it, even though I would argue that's not really true. But just to let it out, or to have somebody be able to hear it, and in that moment, like no advice was given. Like nobody told me, oh, okay, well you can do this and things will get better. Like just having someone listen while I explain some of it was really helpful. And then just to start to walk through, okay, what does this mean? Probably in the last year or two, I've had a discussion with my counselor, the guy that I'm seeing now, And the conversation was, why don't I feel more guilty about some of this stuff? Like I feel like there's things I do feel guilt about and should, but there's other things where it's like and I, I didn't bat an eye, and that happened. And he was actually really helpful in just giving that perspective. Like, you know, trauma, however you describe it, like we don't get to control it. Sometimes something that's really, really impactful to one person is not to another person. And it just, that's the way it is. It's based on how we're wired, our background, how we look at life and all those things. And so don't beat yourself up if you don't have, like, if you didn't feel a traumatic experience when something bad happened, like, okay, move on, or it's okay to move on from that.
No, it's great.
And then,
yeah.
No, right. But then when those things that do really hit you hard, that you can't quite get past, or, you find yourself kind of spinning emotionally or mentally on it, like, it doesn't matter why. It just knows that's a sign you got to do something about it. You got to dig, find a way to dig into that, and not just mask it with alcohol or whatever it is, or distraction. I mean, there's a lot of things we can do to just try to avoid those things that somehow we got to deal with.
Yeah, and that's what it is. One of the guests on my show, he said it almost perfectly. He said you have to deal with your bullshit, or your bullshit will deal with you. You have to address it, or it will address you. And I thought that was perfect. I'm like, that's exactly it, because you could fuck around and go a decade and not address it, and it will address you all 10 years. Or you could start at year one and address it, and hopefully by, a couple years into that, you're back on an even keel, looking to start a company and start a family, because that's the difference that it could make. But if you never address it, it will be with you, and it will stay with you. And look, I've addressed it, and I'm okay in my life right now. But to say that I don't watch an American flag ripple and just weep, or to say, when your guys on the dates that, you got anniversary dates, that's going to be tough forever. Like, in the pictures that you saw in war, they're not leaving. You just find a way to start to cope with that and deal with that with time, right? Time helps those things. But to say that you're going to be 100% cured and everything's going to be okay and you're never going to think about war again, I think that's a fallacy.
No, and that's with everything in life. Like, there's still things that happen. There's things that we experience that will impact us for the rest of our lives. Like, that's just the way it is. And I think a lot of times, the hope is that there's an easy fix, that it won't. But I really like the way you phrase it. Like, you got to deal with your bullshit. Your bullshit's going to deal with you. Like, that's what it was for me. I didn't deal with it for, years and years. And then all of a sudden it all came back on me.
I think a lot of guys struggle with purposelessness too. I think when they get out, they have this huge purpose, this international life and death, leadership of others purpose, where you have to operate on such a level, right? And then, then you come home and you're back with everybody else, and you're not like them anymore. And now you're doing what? You're putting a floor in somebody's house for, $100 a day or something, right? That's what I did. And it's like, what am I doing? Like, I don't find purpose in this. This doesn't drive me. All I think about is that. And now what do I do, right? Yeah. But the second that you just start to give back, and you give back selflessly to something that's bigger than you, and that's what I tell guys now, go find an organization that's bigger than you. I don't care what you're doing in life. Big brother, big sister, they got all these charities. If it's just strictly you want to feel better, go give yourself to something bigger. That's all you have to do. Yeah. That's a start.
Yeah, I completely agree, because there's so much of our identity that's tied into that warrior mentality, and for all, or mostly good reasons, for really good reasons. But when when we step out of that and are back in this, like, peacetime, painfully boring at times world, it's like, what do we, what can we do to replace that, or find something there? And I that's one of the things that's really been instrumental for me, is finding some other things. I've been on some wilderness retreats that I've done and started to help lead and things like that. And just recently got involved in an organization called Patrol Base Abate. I'm going to one of their retreats in Montana in October, and I'm just really excited about it. They do a lot of stuff with just this sort of mindset. Like, hey, find something outside. It's okay to come together and, like, I think their tagline is "Return to Base," and I love that just because it's like that feeling if you've ever been outside the wire, like return to base. Let's get back and like rest and refit, but then go back out. Like that's kind of
that's Major
mindset.
Tom Schumann, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've just started getting involved in a few things they've been doing, and they also do a few things with with literature where they talk about classic books and also recent books where you look at there's a ton of people, yourself included, that I've been able to meet who have all gone through this journey of saying, hey, I'm going to write about my experiences because this was a very profound thing, and you just start feeling drawn to like putting it in perspective and understanding it. And I think that's one of the things that can be really helpful. It's not for everybody, but it's one of the steps that's out there.
I totally agree, man. That's another reation I like to do all of this, man. I'll try to understand my own war still,
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, sometimes the deeper you look at things, you turn out finding things maybe not the way you thought they were. Or weren't headed the way you thought they were, for instance. And that's okay too. And it doesn't bother me, but I do like to understand it. So now seeing, all the way up to 3-star general levels, look at Iraq and Afghanistan, slam down to some of my lance corporals and PFCs that were with me in the squad. And that's a big variety of different levels of stories and emotions and thoughts and, commands and such. And this one falls in because you're the first. I think you're the first Marine reservist I've had on the show, and so that gives a cool look at, the differences and maybe what we do pre-activation and pre-deployment. But the similarities is once it's time to go, it's out to Mojave Viper. We're getting that training package on, and we're going to do the same job, which is phenomenal. What do you do now? Do you hunt? Do you fish? What do you do? What do you do to chill your brain?
So basically anything outdoors. I mean, that's a big part of it. So love hunting. The last few years I've gotten involved in, you might see some of my decoys out here, but
I see them.
I've gotten involved in waterfowl hunting. So I grew up, classic Michigan, doing deer hunting and, small game, but I have loved, duck hunting and goose hunting just because of it's the closest thing. This might sound silly, but it's the closest thing I can find to like a squad going out, or a team going out. You're 4 or 5 guys. You build a little fort, on the side of a pond or whatever, or get out in a boat, and then you're just hanging out, kind of bullshitting until the birds show up. And if they don't, so be it.
Whatever.
So that's been a lot of fun. We're doing a trip up in November to northern Michigan that I'm pretty excited about. So
nice.
Nice.
Awesome, man. What else you got for hobbies?
Reading. Yeah, so I've gotten more into reading. So I call out to your book. I just started it, but haven't gotten into it. But I've really enjoyed. There's another book I've just been reading a little bit called Summer 2009. Andrew Colville, I think, he was a guy who was in Afghanistan around that time. During that time, obviously, but. Yeah, just really enjoyed, reading some of those stories with a different perspective of just, hey, we're all kind of looking at the same thing from different lenses, and it's interesting. That's been interesting. And then trying to think, other than that, so I've got 4 kids. My youngest is in 3rd grade. I'm coaching his football team right now, so that's a lot of fun. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, we got our first game Saturday, so excited about that.
Yeah, that's great, man. I've coached the baseball, I've coached the softball, I haven't coached the football. But my boy is going to be slipping into football this next thing, this next season, I guess, or I guess it'd be the fall season maybe. So, very cool. Well, listen, man, do you have anything? Let's say this. I'll ask it as a question, so you don't have to come up with a million things out of the desert there. What is one thing that you would tell? What is one thing you would tell Marines who are training and living and operating in a peacetime Marine Corps that you would say is imperative for them to understand?
I think I would say don't minimize what you are doing. whether it's guard duty, whether it's training, whether it's, going on a 6-month MU, whatever it is, don't minimize it. It's important experience. And the way the Marine Corps runs is there's always times of peace where there might be somebody that serves for 20 years and never runs into a combat situation. It happens. And then there's times of these intense conflicts. We're kind of coming out of one right now and maybe entering another one in the next couple of years. Who knows? But it feels like every Marine, and I really appreciate what you're doing, because it's about passing on the information and the knowledge and really the heart of the matter to the next generation. Like, there's that 4-year cycle. If you did 4 years and get out, like, you still pass something on to the next people coming in, and whatever your timing is. And so, to take that seriously. Don't just shit on the new guys and tell them they don't know anything or that they suck because they happen to go to boot camp 2 years after you. Like, that's asinine in my mind. Just take the time to really learn from your superiors or people who have been a part of bigger conflicts, and then also learn for yourselves. Like, there's no check out what's going on in Ukraine right now. All the tactics and everything they're using is nothing like the way we fought. Like, there's no, it's completely different. They've got drones fighting drones and dropping bombs on people, and it's just very different. And so even a lot of things we experience, like, the exact tactics may never, ever, happen again the same, but the warrior spirit is the same. And I think that can be passed on. And so every Marine's a part of that and is part guardian of that as they pass it to the next generation.
Oh, yeah, man. Appreciate it. All right, Ron Jansen, appreciate it, man. And again, you guys go out and get this book, Do Yourself a Favor, An Otherwise Healthy Person by Ron Jansen. And that's available everywhere where you buy books right now. And I appreciate you being on, man. All right, guys, for Choices Not Chances, that's going to wrap it up for tonight. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. If you see something in this episode that resonated with you, or it's something that the hitters need to know about, or somebody in your community needs to know about, even if it's one person, share this out to your community. Let that one person get updated and check out the info. So until next time, guys, Choices Not Chances, signing off.